My name's Garland Nixon, and I'm a radio talk show host and political analyst. I work out of Washington, D.C., and also have a show in Los Angeles, California. I think this is important. I think this is a historic event. And one of the reasons is that the ruling class, traditionally, they use social issues to divide us. They use ideological issues to divide everyday working class people who have so much in common. And this was, if nothing else, this was an opportunity for people of various ideologies to come to associate with people who have different beliefs than them in some issues, and to realize we've been had. To realize, you know what, they're just regular people. I was told that these people were crazy, that they were evil, that they wanted to eat me, but there's people from the Communist Party here. There's people from the Libertarian Institute. There's MAGA people. There's everybody, lefties like me, you can think of, who are lefties but don't have some distinct group that I'm a member of. And I think it is important that people came together and associated. Also, there's leaders. We got Ron Paul here. We got Tulsi Gabbard here. We got Dennis Kucinich here, right? So we have people who are leaders of some of these ideological paradigms, as it were, who are highly respected, who people who weren't here will look at them and they'll say, well, if they were there, I like these people, it must be okay. And I think leaving after this, you'll have people, not just
sorry about that,
but people who
my dog nearly pulled over the lighting. Oh, those flipping dogs. Okay. Oh, they ruined the lighting. Yeah, Pudge. Okay, that's a little better. Pudge just nearly took down our lighting, people. Holy cows, that was close. All right, I was going to commentate on that intro to say that I wasn't going to play the entire 4.5-minute interview, and I forget on what channel that was. Garland Nixon, everybody. It's funny, like, I've known people by face but not by name, and not to get my parents in trouble, but my parents watch Fox News a lot, and I know that I've seen Garland on Fox News. So I knew more about him than I thought I knew, except I spent the better part of the day doing my homework to look up any controversies, any scandals in which Garland may have been a part. I found one. We'll get to it in a bit. But all that to say, we're going to talk to Garland about a lot of stuff. We're going to start with childhood, get to where he is now, and then we're going to break down this thing as to what being a lefty means in the mind of someone who thinks that they are a lefty in today's era of politics. I thoroughly believe there's no such thing as lefty or righty anymore, and I thoroughly believe it's red pill, blue pill, red pill. People who think the government does good is people who think the government can be trusted and does good, and those who know that they can't. So Garland Nixon, I'm going to bring him in he'll do the 30,000-foot overview. Barnes might not make it, so I'm waiting for confirmation from Barnes, but Barnes or no Barnes, I got my questions, and this is going to be great. Standard disclaimers, you know the drill. No legal advice, no medical advice, no election fortification advice. We're on Rumble. We're on Locals, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And that's it. Without further ado. Oh, someone wants to say hi. Oh, what do you have to say? I am Winston, your overlord. Okay, good. Get out of here. You go down, and we're going to bring in Garland, coming in 3, 2, 1 now. Garland, sir, how goes the battle?
Absolutely fantastic. Great to finally meet you.
Well, I've seen you on TV more than I knew. I put names to faces, and now I won't forget it. Garland, before we get into the subject matter of the evening, and we're going to talk about the drone behind you. I don't know if you're familiar with my repertoire of drone feats and accomplishments, but we'll get into that in a bit. For those who may not know who you are, 30,000-foot overview, elevator pitch before we get into things.
Okay, I'm trying to give you the short version, but it's of consequence. I was born a very poor kid. I was born in abject poverty. My mom started a company. My dad became a longshoreman. They did quite well. So I went from abject third world poverty to living better than most of my friends and living quite comfortably, right? So I know and have an understanding. If you've never been real poor, you don't understand what it is. So I think that was really beneficial to me as far as experience. I was a law enforcement officer, and for many, many years, I became a law enforcement officer. I actually became a law enforcement official. I rose up pretty high. I was a law enforcement official, worked under the governor's office. In the state of Maryland. I worked with the American Civil Liberties Union for years. I actually worked for the ACLU at one time. I rose up to the National Board of Directors for the ACLU, and I was on the National Board of Directors for years. I did, and I left over something we probably can't talk about here. Well, we're not on YouTube.
Well, hold on. Let me stop you here. I want to get into all of this. I want a 30,000 foot overview, like radio host on the network now. I want to know. I'm getting into your childhood, Garland, because I know minimal. We'll just do it right now. Garland, when you, born in abject poverty, where were you born? Where are your parents from? How many generations American? How many siblings? Like, first of all, where were you born?
I was born in Maryland, in a little country area. Well, it's just actually a suburb of Baltimore, Anne Arundel County, near the water, close to the Chesapeake Bay. Grew up, playing around the water a lot. Grew up with my mom. My parents weren't married at the time, and they eventually got married later on. But my mother, so I was very poor, 4 sisters and a mother, and very, very poor. And my mom, when I was about 8 or 9, started a business, and it was quite successful. She did very, very well. Married my dad, who had married, they weren't married. He had married someone else, and his wife died. And then my parents, oddly enough, when I'm 14 or 15, they get married. So, we were middle class at least. We were doing okay. From as poor as I was, I felt like a billionaire, and I had 4 sisters. My sisters were very sharp, very smart, did very well in school.
Let me ask, hold on. Did you say, so are you the youngest of 5?
I'm the youngest of 5 with 4 sisters.
4 girls and a boy. Mm-hmm. And your dad, who married your mom after his wife died, is that your biological father?
Yes, my biological father, yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of odd. So your parents have intercourse and have children, but don't get married. Then break up while your dad goes to get married.
He goes marry somewhere else. Then that woman dies. Then he marries my mother when I'm a young teenager.
That's amazing. Can I ask, if you know from your mother's perspective, did she always love him? Was there a period where she hated him? And did she harbor any resentment? Never
know. My mom was a very zen kind of person, so I don't think there was any resentment. Extremely independent. So no, she was a bulldozer. So no, absolutely not.
Are your parents still alive?
No, both of my parents are passed.
So the youngest of 5, that's kind of, your dad becomes a widow and then marries your mom, which is your biological mother, and then you're a reunited family.
How weird is that?
It's not the ordinary order of things.
My 4 sisters were from my mother's first marriage, and then she got a divorce. So they're all really technically my half sisters. We don't have the same father. And then she got divorced and had a baby out of wedlock that was me. So kind of weird stuff.
Okay, that's very cool. Born in Baltimore,
outside of Baltimore. Yeah.
We know what Baltimore's like today. Was it always?
No, because back then you had a big steel plant, Sparrows Point. It was working class America, but the black, white, everybody, people could work at the steel plant. And when people got out of high school, they could get a job at the steel plant. My dad worked at the waterfront. They made good money. The men, black, white, no, my dad was a black man. It was more segregated then, but all of his friends had homes and nice cars because they worked at the steel plant or the waterfront. So we were at a time when a person could get out of high school, go down to the steel plant, get a job, benefits, union, all of that stuff, feed their family. Wife didn't have to work. You know what I mean? It was a much better economy back then. It was a working class industrial economy.
When does the steel plant go under or close down?
Late 70s, early 80s, something like that.
You're 54 years old?
No, I'm 61.
Shut the front door. Yeah. well done, sir. No, I only said 54. That's the only age I could find for a Garland Nixon online, but I didn't have a picture with it. So 61, which means that you're born in 61. And so the plant closes down when you're a kid. What happens to the town? Do you see it overnight?
Yes, you saw the difference. You saw the I saw the deindustrialization of America. Let me give you an example. So when I was in law enforcement for many, many years, I was in Marine Division. So I worked on a police boat, right? I remember the early 80s. That's when I started. You go out there. There was working class America. There was boats everywhere. Working class, middle class people could afford boats. There was lots and lots and lots of boats. That's one of the things I saw, small runabouts, things like that, medium-sized boats, right? I saw America change. And one of the ways I saw it was on the bay. Less and less and less boats. It went from lots of people with boats running around having fun to only a select few people. You know what I mean? Now, when you go out on the bay on a Saturday, man, they were everywhere. Now you go out on the bay, not that much. People are just trying to struggle. That's a luxury that people can't afford. It was a luxury that everybody had. Lots of people had it. When I grew up, my dad had a boat.
And it's not as though, I mean, the funny thing is you'd think boats would have gotten cheaper now to be more accessible. Back in the day, I presume, relatively speaking, they were quite expensive. So it's not that it was cheaper back then and people had less money, but it was cheaper. It was expensive and people could afford it. And now they just
people had better jobs. Yes. People had they weren't working at the Shake Shack then. They actually had an industrial job. I knew a guy, my dad had one friend that worked at a sausage, Park Sausages. It was a sausage. He had a nice middle-class home. His wife didn't work. He worked at a Franken stuffing sausages at Park Sausages or something and got a retirement. And retired. He used to go fishing with my dad all the time, lived a decent middle-class life. That was industrial America.
I guess the question is, what happened to that? But we're going to come full circle in terms of what happened to that by the end of this. So you're brought up there. What kind of schools do you go to? Public schools?
Public schools. I know public school.
Good experience or bad experience?
They were decent schools. There were some issues back then because America was still coming out of segregation. So there was racial issues there. But the schools that I went were about, 95 to 99% white. But overall, I enjoyed school. Wasn't terrible.
Okay. So high school, your sisters, what do you do after high school? You go to university?
I go to community college. Then when I go to community college, I'm in community college. I decide I want to look around. First, I want to be a fireman. Then I decided to go to law enforcement. And at that time, law enforcement said, hey, you come here and we'll still pay for you to go to school. They had all kinds of opportunity then. And I decided to found a law enforcement career, and I really enjoyed it. And I got to work on a police boat a lot. Eventually became a hovercraft pilot. I loved the water. I got to be on a police boat and do what I wanted, be in the Marine Division. So it was great.
Okay, that's fantastic. Now, so one thing I was able to figure out online is you were in law enforcement for 20 years. You rose to the rank of major. I don't know what that means, major. But how do you decide to get into law enforcement, and what positions did you hold along the way, and what was that experience like, and where were you enforcing the law?
Okay, so in the state of Maryland, we had it was in some states it's called fish and wildlife, stuff like that. Some places they call them game wardens, things like that. In the state of Maryland, they decided to take our fish and wildlife and game warden and marine police and park service and all that kind of stuff and make it natural resources police under the Department of Natural Resources. Make it the same as Maryland State Police, same uniform, same salary, same everything. So we were effectively Maryland State Police. Our main charge was I was in Marine Division, so I did boating and all that kinds of stuff, everything from, boat accidents, recovering bodies. But we also did regular traditional law enforcement because we had full law enforcement powers too. I mean, I had a ticket book. I could write tickets on the road, whatever. I had a police cruiser, same as state police. Everybody thought I was state police unless they looked at the patch. I mean, regular state trooper. And we had the same authorities. So, and then of course I did everything there. I was, commander of I went up the ranks and I became the commander of the training division, commander of investigations, aviation, all those kinds of things, communication. So I know law enforcement very, very well. I then, when I retired, I taught at Anne Arundel Community College, and I taught law enforcement, investigations, criminal justice, things of that nature. So I have a big, long background in that stuff, and I really enjoyed it. And organized crime. That was my favorite thing to teach, was organized crime.
Okay, that's very, now as an acting law enforcement officer, what if you have one or two of the most striking memories from your experience? Would you be able to tell them offhand?
Well, interesting. One of the most striking experiences, I'll give it to it, and it may sound crazy, but this is one that always sticks in my mind. At the time, weed was completely illegal, right? Marijuana was completely illegal. So I walked down this hill in this park, and there's a couple guys sitting there, and we'd walk around and we check fishermen, or if we had regular crimes and stuff. Right? So I walked down. There's a couple guys sitting there fishing. This is maybe in the 80s. They had their stuff sitting there, and they had a big bag of weed sitting right on their cooler. And they turn around, and I mean, I'm decked out, full law enforcement, regalia, right? They probably figured it's state police. Everybody thought we were state police. We looked exactly the same, and as I said, we're the same state police. The guys turned around, and they were scared to death. They knew they were done. They knew they were going to jail. They knew it was game, set, and match, right? And they turned around, they looked at me, and I'm like, "Afternoon, gentlemen," and they're like, hi. They're scared to death. And I talked to them. I'm like, "You got your fishing license?" Yes. They showed me their fishing licenses. "All right, guys, you catching anything?" And I said, "Let me take a look in your cooler." And they just looked at each other. I was just kind of screwing with them, tell you the truth. They took the weed off and they set it there, and they opened the cooler, and I looked. I'm like, "Okay, you're doing really good." And then I just pretended like I didn't see the weed. They knew they were gone to jail, done, finished. Right. And I said, "All right, guys, have a nice day." Turn around and walk back up the hill. And they just kind of looked at each other like, "Did that really just happen? Did a cop just really walk up and we had a bag of weed and he didn't say a word?" And I walked back up the hill and laughed, actually. I thought, that's hilarious. The cop, they're done. They're going to jail. But 27 years, I never arrested anyone for law enforcement. I mean, for weed. Never did it once.
That is actually probably a defining you might remember it because it's defining to you, as it should be defining for everybody who's now going to get to know you, is that you're a law enforcement officer. In theory, you have a duty to uphold the law, but in a more meaningful sense, you have the duty to uphold justice. And you see two people who have a bag of weed. You could ruin their lives for the rest of their lives for something which, whether or not you're into it, it's now been legalized recreationally in Canada, elsewhere as well, and you decide just to ignore it. Do you think that they thought you were a total nincompoop, or they knew damn well what you were doing?
They knew. I saw it. It was right in front of them. I don't think they knew what the hell happened. I guess it was obvious to them that I decided to ignore it. It was obvious to them. They had no idea why. But see, you just said the word that even now with politics and geopolitics and international politics, which I focus on, right? You just hit the nail on the head, buddy. The word is justice. I believe in justice. That's one of my principles. Justice, fairness. Does every single person have the same expectation of rights? And am I acting in a way that's just? People say, "I believe in law and order." I don't believe in law and order. Laws can be extremely unjust. Our government, makes terrible unjust. And we look and we say, "Why in the hell well, that's not just." And so as a human being, I was not going to be, I was a law enforcement, but I'm a human being first. And I was not going to be unjust to a fellow person. And that's the way I feel. And people get mad at me when it comes to evaluating international politics. It's about justice to me. And that, I think that's why that always sticks in my mind, because there was never a thought in my mind of arresting those guys or doing anything bad, anything to them, because it would have been unjust. And I never, ever, I had instance after instance. I never locked anybody up or took any action against anybody for weed in all those years.
Well, let me ask you this. At the time, this is your philosophy. Do you think that your philosophy was more prevalent in the force then than it is now? Or were you the exception to the,
I was the exception to the rule.
Could you have gotten into trouble hypothetically
No, because remember, there's something in law enforcement called officer's discretion. And I could make the argument in the same way that if I walked up and saw somebody who spit on the sidewalk, which is technically illegal, because I taught in the academy, so I taught this stuff. Technically, it's illegal to spit on the sidewalk. So the question is, do I have a duty to write someone a ticket for spitting on the sidewalk? No, we have what's called officer's discretion. There are certain things that you don't have discretion on, such as felonies and things of that nature. But for misdemeanors and things like that, if I arrested everybody for misdemeanors all day long, I'd never be out there to answer calls of service. Somebody calls help. There's a murder in progress. Sorry, can't do it. I'm writing somebody a ticket for spitting on the sidewalk. So I could easily make the argument based on the principle of officer's discretion that I was making a decision because I wanted to remain on patrol for crimes against people, crimes against persons and property and things of that nature.
Yeah, I'm going to bring this one up because I actually didn't ask it. Do you believe in God? It's a personal question, but I didn't ask if you were brought up religious.
I was brought up religious. My mother was a very devout, Christian, Southern Baptist, things of that nature, right? And so I don't believe in God. I don't not believe in God. I study Zen. So, I study the principle of Zen. So to me, that's a question that doesn't need to be answered to me. And, because when you say God, what do you mean? What kind of God? Do you mean an old guy that has that sits on a throne and has a beard? Is that what you mean? Do you mean the kind of God that the Hindus, when they say he's non-dual, he's not non-dual, meaning not one and not many? What do you mean when you say God? If Jesus was in India and he said, hey, look, you know what? I'm the son of God. They'd say, great to meet you. So am I. I'm glad you finally realized that. So the question, do I believe in God, is a broad question. You know what I mean? It's a broad, unless if you are a particular religion, if you are of a particular religion, and even a particular branch of a particular religion, do you believe in God has a specific meaning to it? So it's such a broad question. I don't believe in God. I don't not believe in God. That's a question that I don't need answered.
Well, that's one of my classic retorts is it doesn't matter if God exists, and it doesn't matter if I don't believe in him. And if he doesn't exist, it doesn't matter if I do. And then it does depend on what your definition is, because some people would say God is not the euphemism, but rather the synonym for original creator, which could be, the Big Bang. Okay, hold on, Garland. Before we go on, people, we're going to go over to Rumble right now, and it's not for freer discussion. It's just because we're going to go to Rumble, and then I'm going to post this entire interview on YouTube tomorrow. But Garland, doesn't change anything from our perspective. We continue going on, and I'm just going to end on YouTube. Go to Rumble, people. I will see you there. Should see 1,000 more faces there in a second.